now back to Philadelphia. The fatal beating of 73-year-old James Lambert, which you just saw a video of there. It's renewed a debate over whether Philadelphia DA Larry Krasner's policies are to blame for the city's crime wave. NewsNation host Leland Vittert last night on that.
Here are some of Larry Krasner's policies. Never pursue the death penalty. Reject stop and frisk. Reform cash bail system. Stop abuse of civil asset forfeiture and promote alternatives to incarceration. They're working. Of the 1,226 shootings this year in Philadelphia, 79% don't have a court case associated with the crime. Nobody has been charged. James Lambert's murder went unsolved until two of the teens turned themselves in.
And you just saw him on tape. Now it's Leland Vittert, host of Unbiased, joining us now. And Leland, the first question I have for you is, after the murder of George Floyd, these progressive district attorneys, they had a moment. But we've already seen Chesa Boudin recalled in San Francisco, and now there's an effort to get Larry Krasner recalled, or at least removed from office here, impeached in Philadelphia. So is this murder of James Lambert, is this a turning point that could spark some changes?
Well, certainly the people who want to impeach Larry Krasner say that this feeling of lawlessness in Philadelphia is exactly what they are talking about and why they are so mad at Larry Krasner. They're wanting to impeach him. It would be the state legislature that would bring him up on misconduct charges and impeach him, and then he would be convicted in the Senate. It's very similar to how the U.S. House and Senate would impeach somebody. We're a long way from that. And last night I talked to one of the state representatives who's leading this charge. He himself admitted it could be months even before there would be a vote in the House of Representatives. But a big part of their case is going to be the litany of people that have been released either on no bail or low bail or lack of pretrial incarceration or given alternative sentences, who then went on to commit crimes in Larry Krasner's Philadelphia. Remember, Krasner has been reelected overwhelmingly in Philadelphia by his own citizens, despite a lot of these policies. So there's a lot of give and take here. The one thing about James Lambert's murder that's really sort of changed the conversation is just how young these people are. 10 and 14 are the first two siblings to have turned themselves in and be implicated in this crime that no one really knew about, although it had happened back in June. So with this crime with Lambert, I think it's a little bit different. 10 and 14-year-olds aren't necessarily repeat offenders, but the idea that a 10-year-old at 3 o'clock in the morning would think this is okay probably indicates something a lot worse in society than simply low bail policies.
And we saw that clip of you from last night, Leland. You were laying out the reasons why Krasner has been ineffective at best as a Philadelphia district attorney. Now, he has blamed the NRA and Pennsylvania state Republicans. He's claiming that lax gun laws are driving this crime wave, but we just saw the murder of James Lambert on camera, and there were no guns used. What is your response to his claims that it's the NRA to blame?
Well, it's a good point, and you have to ask yourself whether Krasner views his policies as a failure or a success. But the issue may not necessarily be lax gun laws, but enforcing the laws that we have. Felon in possession of a firearm, which oftentimes would send people to jail for many, many years, isn't prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law by Krasner. Krasner's argument would go something along the lines of, if only there were laws that prevented every firearm in the world, then we wouldn't have firearms. To your point, bad people will find other ways, like traffic cones, to go kill people. But at the same time, the law is only as good as it is enforced. And one of the articles of impeachment against Krasner will likely be that he's not enforcing the laws already on the books, including a lot of the gun laws that include felon in possession, meaning that if somebody is a felon who's picked up with a gun, that in and of itself is a crime, and they would be sent away to jail rather than released back on the street under Krasner's policy to go pick up another illegal gun and commit another crime.
Now, Leland, Republicans have been wielding law and order politics like, sorry to use this term in the context, but like a truncheon. Is this a legit chance to reform Philadelphia and its law and order issues, or is this midterm politics playing itself out?
That's really ends up being up to the voters, right? And what we're seeing now is crime, which has become a catch-all for the feeling of lawlessness and unease that is permeating American cities, rising up in the polls of issues that people are concerned about. Obviously, the economy is still number one. Economy, inflation, unease about where America is headed economically. Oftentimes, number two or number three is crime, and people will end up voting on what they believe will keep them safe, and that's a big issue for swing voters, which is a lot of the people we talk about. These are soccer moms in suburban America who in 2016 switched from Trump to Biden because they didn't like the mean tweets. Well, now they don't feel safe driving downtown, or they don't feel safe driving through their own suburbs. And who will keep them safe? And Republicans say they will. The proof sort of is in the pudding, and that you started about it in your lead, which is Chesa Boudin in San Francisco, one of the original of the very, very progressive prosecutors who say, oh, the issue is not locking people up, but it's all of these other laws that are racist. And if only we were a little bit more progressive and we understood why people were committing these crimes and we didn't lock people up for shoplifting, then things would be okay. He was recalled. George Gascon in Los Angeles now has, I think it's 750,000 signatures for his recall election. These are deep blue cities. You've got the potential impeachment of Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. Now you have the mayor of the city of New York coming directly after the prosecutor Alvin Bragg. You're starting to see that with Kim Foxx here in Chicago. And then obviously you have Kim Gardner in St. Louis, who's under real pressure about her lack of prosecution. So this is becoming a trend, if you will, and a successful one for Republicans.
And that's why Leland Vittert hosts his own show, because he knows what he's talking about. He's intelligent, he's well-researched, and he's doing double duty for us. So, Leland, thank you for joining us. You can watch him on Balance. His show is tonight, and it's every weeknight. It starts at 7 Eastern and 6 Central. Adrienne?
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.